$1,500. That's the ridiculous fine Teresa Wilson, our HOA president, slapped on my fence the day I was simply enjoying a swim in my own backyard pool. If you're watching this while relaxing at home, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from, because the spectacular downfall of this neighborhood tyrant will have you cheering in satisfaction. I bought my dream house in Oak Ridge Estates just 7 months ago after my tech startup finally got acquired. After years of living in cramped apartments and working 80-hour weeks, I'd earned this slice of paradise with its spacious yard and stunning pool area. The pool, however, was definitely showing its age. The concrete was cracked, the filtration system barely functioning, and the overall appearance screamed neglect. I followed all proper procedures, submitted detailed renovation plans to the HOA, received written approval for every change, and invested $45,000 transforming my backyard into a modern oasis. I replaced the cracked concrete with elegant travertine tiles, installed a state-of-the-art filtration system, added color-changing LED lighting, and built a beautiful stone waterfall feature. The crowning achievement was a covered outdoor living space with comfortable seating, a professional grill, and a small refrigerator for cold drinks. It was everything I'd dreamed of, a perfect retreat after stressful workdays. My first encounter with Teresa Wilson happened at the neighborhood welcome mixer. She approached me with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "So you're the new owner of the Morrison place?" she said, looking me up and down. "I've seen the construction crews. Quite extensive renovations you're doing." "Yes," I replied enthusiastically. "The pool area needed a complete overhaul. I'm really excited about how it's turning out." She murmured, swirling her wine glass. "You know, Oak Ridge Estates has certain standards. I hope you're keeping everything appropriate." I assured her I had all the proper approvals, which seemed to disappoint her somehow. As she walked away, another resident whispered, "Watch out for that one. Teresa thinks she owns this neighborhood." I dismissed the warning, thinking it was just typical neighborhood politics. Big mistake. 2 weeks after my renovation was completed, I invited a few friends over for a small housewarming party. Just 6 people total, some quiet music and a casual barbecue. We were enjoying our evening when Teresa appeared at my gate, her expression thunderous as she waved an official-looking document. "This is completely unacceptable," she snapped, thrusting the paper toward me. "Unauthorized gathering with excessive noise and lighting violations. That will be $1,500 in fines." I stared at her in disbelief. "This is a small get-together with a few friends. There's nothing in the HOA guidelines prohibiting this." Teresa's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you should read the updated community regulations more carefully. Section 5.3 clearly states that outdoor gatherings with more than 4 non-resident guests require advance HOA approval." I took the fine notice, promising to review the regulations, though I had absolutely no intention of paying such a ridiculous fine. That night, after my guests left, I went through every page of the HOA documentation I'd received when purchasing the house. Just as I suspected, there was no such rule about guest limits. However, when I checked my email, I found a message from Teresa sent just 10 days earlier with "Updated HOA Guidelines, Immediate Implementation" in the subject line. Attached was a PDF containing several new restrictions, including the guest limitation she'd cited. At the bottom was my electronic signature. Except I had never signed this document. I was still processing this discovery when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Teresa's targeting you. You're not the first. We should talk. Michael from Oak Lane." I sat back, bourbon in hand, staring at the message. This wasn't just about a power-hungry HOA president. This was fraud. Someone had forged my signature on official documents. I stepped onto my patio, looking at the pool that had somehow become the center of this conflict. The water reflected the evening sky as the color-changing lights shifted from blue to purple. The next day, I met Michael at a coffee shop several blocks from our neighborhood. A former IT security consultant in his 50s, Michael had moved to Oak Ridge Estates 3 years ago. "Teresa's been running this scam for years," he explained, showing me a folder of documentation. "She targets homes with attractive features, especially newly renovated ones, then fabricates violations until people either comply with her demands or sell." "Comply with what demands?" I asked. Michael sighed. "She runs a side business called Elite Property Showcase. They use residential homes for luxury events, corporate retreats, and photo shoots. She's been trying to add more pool properties to her portfolio." He showed me photos of neighborhood homes being used for various events, wedding receptions, corporate parties, even fashion photo shoots, all without the owner's knowledge. How does she get away with this? Fear, intimidation, and the fact that most people don't want the hassle of fighting back. She creates new rules specifically designed to target whoever she's after, forges signatures on documents, and levies outrageous fines. Michael pulled out his tablet and showed me something that made my blood boil. A promotional Instagram post from Elite Property Showcase featuring a photo of MY newly renovated pool with the caption, "Coming soon, our newest luxury event space. Available for bookings starting next month." She's planning to use my property without my permission? I was incredulous. That's exactly what she's doing, Michael confirmed. And based on past patterns, your $1,500 fine is just the beginning. She'll keep finding violations until you either let her use your place or sell and move out. My phone pinged with a notification about an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for the following evening. The agenda: review and approval of updated pool usage regulations. Classic Teresa move, Michael said. Creating new rules to tighten the noose. When I returned home that evening, I noticed something deeply disturbing. Through my kitchen window, I spotted Teresa leading a small group of well-dressed people around my pool area. They were measuring, taking photos, and making notes, all while I wasn't home. They were trespassing on my property. I quietly recorded video of their invasion, capturing clear footage of Teresa using her own key to access my backyard gate, a key I had never given her. As I watched them treating my property like their own, I realized I wasn't just fighting unfair fines. I was defending my home from a calculated takeover. The HOA meeting was held in our community center. About 30 homeowners attended, though many avoided eye contact with me as I entered. Teresa stood at the front, impeccably dressed in a designer pantsuit, flanked by two other board members who seemed to function as her personal yes-men. Teresa smoothly guided the meeting through minor community issues before reaching the main agenda item: new restrictions on pool usage. The proposed rules effectively made it impossible to use outdoor pools without constant fear of violations. Specific hours only, no more than 2 people at a time, no food or beverages, no music, and mandatory quiet periods that covered most evenings and weekends. When she finished her presentation, she called for questions, clearly expecting none. I raised my hand. "I'd like to understand the process by which these regulations were approved," I said, standing up. "According to Section 12.3 of our bylaws, any rule changes require a 75% direct vote from residents, not just approval at a meeting." A murmur ran through the room as Teresa's smile tightened. She claimed that the board had conducted an electronic vote and received the necessary approval. When I pressed for evidence of this vote, one of her yes-men quickly interjected with some irrelevant bylaw about the board's inspection authority. "That doesn't address my question," I pointed out. "But since you've brought up inspections, I'd like to know why you, Ms. Wilson, were in my backyard yesterday with a group of strangers, measuring my pool area without my knowledge or consent." I held up my phone showing I had video evidence. The room fell silent. An elderly resident in the back row gasped audibly. Teresa's composure slipped for just a moment before she regained control, claiming she had conducted a standard inspection after multiple complaints about my pool activities. The meeting deteriorated quickly after that. Her yes-men called for an immediate vote on the new regulations, rushing through the procedure. Despite my objections, the measure passed, with most homeowners either voting in favor or abstaining out of what I could only assume was fear. The next morning, I discovered a local blog had published an article about a nuisance homeowner disrupting neighborhood peace with unauthorized pool parties. The comment section was filled with anonymous complaints about noise and unsavory visitors at my address, all completely fabricated. That afternoon, I received an official notice of a pool safety inspection scheduled for the following day. I knew immediately this was Teresa's doing, likely calling in favors from contacts in local government. The inspector arrived accompanied by Teresa, who claimed she was there as an HOA representative. Despite my meticulous preparation, they found several minor issues. The pH level of my pool was slightly off optimal range, my outdoor refrigerator temperature was 1 degree above recommended, and my drainage system might potentially cause runoff during heavy rain. Total fine, another $1,200. That evening, I received a surprising text from Brian, one of Teresa's yes-men, asking to meet urgently. Despite my suspicions, I agreed, suggesting the local library after hours. Brian arrived looking nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder. "Teresa is planning something big with your property," he whispered. "She's already sold tickets to a series of exclusive poolside dining experiences at your address, starting next weekend. $200 per person with 3 events scheduled each month. He slid a USB drive across the table. This contains emails, financial records, and her entire client list. She's been running this scheme for years, using at least 7 different properties in the neighborhood without permission. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Brian looked down. She has something on me, evidence of a mistake I made when I first joined the board. I've been too afraid to stand up to her, but what she's doing now, it's gone too far. As he was about to say more, we both froze at the sound of heels clicking on the library's tile floor. Teresa appeared around the corner, her phone pointed directly at us. Well, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. The troublemaker and the treasurer having a secret meeting. I wonder what the other board members would think about this little conspiracy. Brian's face drained of color as he quickly pocketed the USB and stammered some excuse before rushing out. Left alone with Teresa, I maintained my composure. Taking pictures of people without consent could be considered harassment, I stated calmly. She smiled coldly. These will make excellent evidence of your attempts to bribe an HOA official, she said, scrolling through the photos on her phone. I wonder how your neighbors would feel about that. Before I could respond, she turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. The next morning, I examined the USB Brian had managed to slip to me despite Teresa's interruption. It contained a goldmine of evidence. Financial records showing Teresa had embezzled over $75,000 from the HOA maintenance fund, forged electronic signatures on dozens of documents, and emails explicitly discussing her plans to use several homes, including mine, for her business without the owner's consent. Most damning was a spreadsheet tracking homeowners she had successfully driven out of the neighborhood, complete with the profit she'd made selling their homes as their real estate agent and the commissions from using their properties for events before they sold. While I was still processing this information, I discovered that my company ratings had been flooded with negative reviews overnight. Someone was clearly working to destroy not just my peace at home but potentially my livelihood as well. I knew I needed to act quickly. After consulting with Michael and a lawyer friend, I developed a plan. First, I needed to protect my property from Teresa's immediate threat, the scheduled events at my pool. I called a security company and arranged for emergency installation of a secure fence system around my entire pool area. By that evening, my backyard had been transformed. A professional-grade 8-foot security fence now surrounded my entire pool area, complete with an electronic lock system and prominent "No trespassing" signs. The fence was perfectly legal, constructed with materials that matched my home's exterior, and fully compliant with all city building codes. I had even installed additional security cameras at key points, all completely legal and properly permitted. The fence was positioned entirely within my property line, leaving no legal grounds for the HOA to object. The confrontation came the next day. Teresa arrived with a photographer and 2 caterers, presumably to begin setup for her first scheduled event. I watched through my security cameras as she approached my backyard gate, key in hand, only to find it replaced by a solid fence with a prominent "No trespassing" sign. Her expression transformed from confusion to disbelief to rage. She pounded on my front door, demanding an explanation. I calmly opened the door with my phone recording in my pocket. "Can I help you?" I asked innocently. Teresa was practically shaking with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, gesturing wildly toward my backyard. "We have events scheduled." I maintained my composure as I explained that due to serious security and liability concerns following multiple unauthorized entries to my property, I had been forced to restrict access indefinitely. Teresa stormed around to my backyard, pulling at the gate and fence in frustration. I followed at a distance, openly recording. "That's vandalism of private property, Ms. Wilson," I stated calmly. "And if you attempt to damage this fence, I'll have to call the police." She whirled to face me, her cheeks flushed with fury. "You don't understand. I have clients coming. Important people. To my private property? Without my permission? That sounds like planned trespassing," I replied. "This violates community regulations," she spat. I smiled slightly. "Which community?" "The community of homeowners you've been defrauding." I showed her my city permit for the fence and explained that it complied with all legitimate HOA regulations. The real ones, not her fabricated versions. "You'll regret this," she hissed as she stormed away. I immediately sent an email to all Oak Ridge Estates residents. Due to legal and safety concerns following repeated unauthorized entries, I have been forced to indefinitely secure my pool area. Unfortunately, this will affect any events that may have been planned without my knowledge or permission at my address. Within minutes, my phone was flooded with messages, some from confused neighbors, others from angry clients who had paid deposits for events at my venue, and finally a legal threat from Teresa claiming breach of HOA regulations and demanding immediate removal of the fence. The next battlefield would be the emergency HOA meeting Teresa had called for the following evening to address my blatant violations of community standards. The community center was packed for the emergency meeting. Teresa had clearly been working the phones, turning residents against me with stories about how my selfishness would damage property values. She called the meeting to order and launched into a presentation about my violations, showing selective photos of my fence taken from unflattering angles. Her yes men followed with a proposal for $1,000 daily fines for noncompliance and authorization for the HOA to pursue legal action. The room buzzed with whispers as Teresa called for questions. Several residents raised concerns about the fence's appearance, while others seemed confused about why this required an emergency meeting. When she finally asked if anyone else wanted to speak before the vote, I calmly raised my hand and walked to the front of the room, connecting my laptop to the projector. "I appreciate everyone coming out tonight," I began. "I think there's some additional information that might help clarify the situation." Teresa attempted to object, but several residents called for me to be allowed to speak. "First, I want to address the fence," I said, displaying the city permit and safety regulations that authorize the structure. "This is a fully legal installation that complies with all safety laws." I then switched to a different slide. "But there's a more important issue we need to discuss tonight. Many of you have noticed changes to our HOA regulations over the past year, new restrictions, increased fines, special assessments for community improvements that never materialized." The room grew quieter as people leaned forward. Methodically, I presented evidence showing how Teresa had used HOA funds to support her private business, forged electronic signatures on regulatory changes, and planned events in residents' homes without permission. Michael joined me, displaying his home's appearance in elite property showcase marketing materials without his knowledge or consent. Then came the bombshell: emails proving Teresa had been systematically targeting homeowners with attractive properties, creating fake violations, and either using their homes for profit or forcing them to sell. "But perhaps most concerning," I continued, "is that Ms. Wilson has been serving as the real estate agent for these distressed sales, earning double commissions while forcing your neighbors out of their homes." I displayed a spreadsheet showing Teresa had made over $320,000 in real estate commissions from homes she had essentially forced onto the market through her harassment campaigns. Teresa leapt to her feet, her face contorted with rage. "This is slander. He hacked into private business communications," she shouted. As the room erupted in questions and shouts, the community center door opened, and a man in a suit entered. "James Lawson, County Fraud Investigation Unit," he announced, holding up credentials. "We've been monitoring Ms. Wilson's activities for some time following multiple complaints." The chaos that followed was immediate. Residents were on their feet, shouting questions at Teresa, who stood pale and speechless. Her yes-men quickly distanced themselves, claiming they had no knowledge of her schemes. Brian, looking both terrified and relieved, admitted to the room that he had helped forge documents under duress. "She threatened to ruin me professionally if I didn't cooperate," he explained. One by one, other residents began sharing their own experiences with Teresa's manipulation and intimidation, stories they had been too frightened to tell previously. The community voted unanimously to remove Teresa from the HOA board, and James Lawson announced there would be a formal investigation into the financial discrepancies and forged documents. 3 months later, Oak Ridge Estates was transformed. Teresa was facing multiple fraud charges, her elite property showcase business had collapsed, and she had sold her house and left the neighborhood. Michael had been elected as the new HOA president, running on a platform of transparency and community focus. The new board's first actions included revising the bylaws to prevent future abuses of power, creating a clear system for residents to report concerns, and establishing quarterly financial reviews by an independent auditor. As for me, I had removed the security fence once the threat was gone. The space that had been at the center of so much conflict was now being used for something I never expected: monthly community gatherings. It had started as a simple gesture, an open invitation to neighbors for a poolside barbecue to celebrate our collective victory over Teresa's tyranny. The event had been such a success, with people who had lived next door to each other for years actually meeting for the first time, that everyone wanted to make it a regular tradition. The monthly pool gatherings became a symbol of our neighborhood's transformation from isolated homeowners afraid to speak up into a true community where people looked out for each other. At our third monthly gathering, as children splashed in the pool and adults chatted in groups around the yard, Michael raised his glass in a toast. To standing up to bullies, he said, nodding in my direction. And to remembering that a community isn't defined by its rules, but by its people. I looked around at the scene, families enjoying themselves without fear of arbitrary fines or harassment, and felt a profound satisfaction. Teresa had tried to use my pool to build her private empire, but instead, it had become the catalyst for something much more valuable, a neighborhood reclaiming its soul. And that, my friends, is how an HOA Karen who fined me for using my own pool ended up losing everything: her power, her business, and her reputation. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. Have you ever dealt with a difficult HOA? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about fighting back against those who abuse their power.